Howdy, all. This is Chad Channing from Can of Clouds, and you're listening to Nothing Shocking Podcast. Enjoy.
Want to know what's going on in the world of music? Then tune in to the Nothing Shocking Podcast, a non-genre based, all-ages friendly rock and roll program. Join us weekly for interviews with all your favorite rock stars from the mainstream to the underground. You can find us at nothingshocking.libsyn.com or anywhere you download podcasts.
We're putting the band back together.
The numbers all go to 11.
I'm talking about bands that rock. Led Zeppelin. What about Sabbath? AC/DC. Motorhead.
Does that mean it's louder? Isn't it any louder?
Well, it's one louder, isn't it?
We're not worthy! We're not worthy!
Why don't you just make 10 louder and make 10 be the top number and make that a little louder?
These go to 11.
I get up off the ground and raise my head. Days like this, think I should be dead. One for Satan, two for me. Let's cheat the devil, it's fun, don't you agree?
Welcome to the Nothing Shocking Podcast. I'm your co-host, Jeff Antita, and with me in Dogbowl Studio is
Coach Nez.
You can find the Nothing Shocking Podcast on Libsyn or any podcatchers. Like our Facebook page or follow us on X at No Shock Pod.
You can also find the Nothing Shocking Podcast on Rock Rage Radio every Sunday morning at 7 a.m. Central Time. Our new sponsor is Big Strix Vinyl Records and Sports Cards, located in Rock Island, Illinois. New, vintage, and previously owned. You can find it at Big Strix. We would like to thank the Hong Kong Sleepover for allowing us to use their music. For our intro and bumper ending, tonight's guest is
Chad Channing, formerly of Nirvana, but we talk about a bunch of his pre-Nirvana bands and
Fire Ants,
the Methodists. Before Cars is a cool project. He's more of a lead singer-songwriter in that arena, but he's got a new band, Can of Clouds.
Yeah, promoting the latest album, Passing Vistas.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, hey, let's get to that interview.
All right, good night.
Good night. Chad, welcome to the Nothing Shocking Podcast. I'd like to introduce to you my co-host, Jeff Hunting.
Chad, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you much. Thank you for having me.
Man, thank you for the correspondence. We're so excited to have you tonight. So let's get right into this here. So before we dive deep into your professional career, some of our listeners and your fans might not know about your journey into the music business. Can you kind of talk to us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So, before I was actually really into music, my aspiration was actually, I just wanted to be a football player, or well, I should say a soccer player.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, growing up, my hero was Pele. What actually got me into music was an accident. It was at school and gym. It was kind of a freak accident. I broke my upper femur in 7 places.
Holy cow.
And that put me in traction. I was in traction for almost 2 months. In the hospital, and then after that, they put me in a body cast that kind of went up under my armpits. I was in that for another 9 months, which the traction system was actually built inside the cast. It was kind of strange. Yeah. And then I had to learn to walk again. It took about 3 months to do that. But throughout that time, I just started getting into music, listening to a lot of music and stuff like that. And I'd realized, well, I'd messed myself up so bad. There really wasn't any chance of me continuing doing soccer anymore. So that's kind of what sort of pointed my direction to music. So that accident just kind of flipped things around. And strangely, the first instrument I ever picked up was violin, only because it was offered at the public school that I went to. Yeah. It was back in the 4th grade. Yeah. So, I took that for about, I think, 5 months. That's about as long as I lived there. So that was like in Port Angeles. And I moved from there, and that was kind of the last I ever did violin. My parents couldn't really afford to, rent me a violin, let alone actual lessons. It was just kind of a strange thing to see available in a public school to begin with. So that was always kind of strange.
Oh, very good.
Did any of your other family members have a history in music, or was it just something that you picked up first?
Well, my dad used to play stand-up bass in a couple of groups, totally into the whole jazz scene.
Yeah.
And he played for about 3 years in the scene down in L.A. My grandfather, on my mom's side, he was a clarinet and a sax player, and he was in the big band. So he played with like the Dorsey brothers. I don't know if you're familiar with Tommy Dorsey.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of where his scene was.
Oh, that's cool.
And then my mom, she did a little bit of singing early on in her growing up, and she actually once got on stage, and I'm not sure how this happened, but she ended up singing on stage with Chet Baker once.
Oh,
which
wow.
was kind of like, yeah, I know. That's what I said when she told me that. I was like, what? It's kind of funny because especially my dad, he's not very forthcoming in a lot of things that he's done. He's done a lot of things, but so years later, I'll hear about these things. I'm like, what? Really? Well, how come I didn't? Why didn't you tell me that earlier? That's kind of cool to know, all this kind of stuff. But anyways, and then, also both my sisters also play too. One plays guitar. They both actually played flute for a while, but yeah. So it's just kind of always been music all throughout my family. So.
Well, let's fast forward to your teenage years into the melting pot of the Seattle music scene. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, by the time, when I got in here, moved into Washington, I'd started after a while. I started a few, small bands. High school stuff, but it didn't move amount to anything. But when I moved to the area in Puget Sound, that's where I really started connecting and meeting new friends. For example, like Ben Shepherd. So one of my oldest friends, of course, played bass with Soundgarden.
Yeah.
And then I ended up meeting Kevin Wood and Andy Wood, and then Brian Wood, the Wood Brothers. And later ended up actually playing with Kevin. A lot of the bands some of the bands that I played with, I ended up playing with other bands that I would later be associated with and do things with. But for me, the music scene initially was like the whole punk rock scene. That's what I really started getting into, and that was around like 81, 82, and I started going to a lot of shows. A place called the Guerrilla Gardens, which was an all ages club, and it was a great place. I saw all kinds of bands there, like Husker Du and things like that. So, that was kind of a lot of fun doing all that, and that was kind of the whole, obviously a very, very pre-grunge era. But I think a lot of that music and stuff was just kind of slowly just inspiring me to do more and different things down the road.
Yeah. The thing that's we had spoke to Robert Roth of Truly 2 weeks ago, then Hiro Yamamoto as well, and they talked very candidly about the early days of the venues, the all ages venues in Seattle.
Like the Metropolis. Yeah,
the Metropolis, the Guerrilla Gardens, and what have you. Talk a little bit more about those venues and how they impacted your career.
Yeah, well, those were great venues, and there were so many. Lincoln Arts Center, UTC Hall, but the Guerrilla Gardens especially was sort of like the main club that I probably saw most of my shows that I went to. And I mean, bands would come in, like I said, I mentioned like Husker Du, 7 Seconds, GBH, and I was really into the whole punk rock scene. And it's funny, I came across. And about a few months ago, I was digging around some of the old papers and stuff that I have in a bin, and I came across the Rocket. Now the Rocket is a Seattle publication that it was just a whole total, and had all the music stuff going on, just a total music scene. And looking back, and I'm looking at, they used to have a calendar of all the shows that would show up. And every weekend, I'm looking back at this, I think it was like 82, and like every weekend was a great show. I mean, one weekend, you had the Wipers playing, Poison Idea. It's just like there was always something really, really cool going on. And so I went to a lot of shows, and many of those were, like I said, were at the Guerrilla Gardens. And even after a while, some of my friends had started a band called NPO. And they would, play at Guerrilla Gardens, so I go out to see them a lot. So being a musician, and then, I was always inspired by my friends and other bands, and they'd go out and like play places like that. And I'd be, man, I want to do that too, So, but that whole scene was it was really, really, really cool for me because it was my first. Really just my involvement in some sort of music scene. I'd never really experienced that before. I mean, it was like the first, just immerse myself in the whole thing that was going on. And I dove right into it. So it was really, really cool. Like, one of the earliest shows I saw, actually it was more mid-'80s. This band showed up, and Ben was telling me about them. And I had this cassette tape, and I went to the sound guy. I said, "Can I stick this in the board and record it?" He said, "Yeah, sure." So I put it in the board to record the show. For whatever reason, it only ended up being a mono recording, so I only had it was mono, so but it was Soundgarden.
Oh yeah,
wow,
nice.
Yeah, but it was like when you play it back, it only comes out of the right speaker, and that's it. And of course, being that it was on the board with the tracks, it was mostly guitar and vocal that you would hear. The bass and the drums are a little bit kind of buried a bit, simply because of the way that it was mixed or coming from the board. So yeah, it was kind of a shame I did not know much about that back then.
Absolutely.
Stonecrow was a band I believe you were in with Jason Everman, who would go on to join Soundgarden. I just thought this would be a perfect time to interject that one.
Yeah, Stonecrow. So yeah, Stonecrow. That was around. I think we started around 85. And that was like the first sort of metal band that I really got into. At that point, around 85, 86, I started getting into the whole scene like Slayer, Destruction, Sodom, a lot of bands like that. And Stonecrow was heavily influenced off of that stuff. So it was, me and Rob Day, Mike Houghton, and then Jason. And that was a lot of fun because we got to play with bands like, we opened for like DRI, Corrosion of Conformity, number of bands. And we played quite a few shows. And when John Goodmanson actually recorded our first demo, which we did up in Rob's bedroom. He just brought in the 4-track and stuff and just kind of mic'd us in there. But of course, Goodmanson, went on to, engineer a lot of good stuff down the road, and then later moved to New York, doing a lot more music stuff. But Stonecrow was a lot of fun. It was probably my first, experience in immersing myself in actually playing shows in a band. And so that was a lot of fun for me.
Oh, so cool. Well, let's go to what you're doing right now. Your current project, Can of Clouds, might be an endeavor our listeners might not know about. Can you tell our listeners a little bit more about Can of Clouds and the ideology behind the band?
Okay, yeah, great. So Can of Clouds, I've always had, I've always had some influence of, electronic music. I've always liked stuff like Kraftwerk, Michael Jarre.
Yes,
love him, and even like more, really, up in the clock. I like like Dead Mouse, stuff like that. So I've always had this idea of doing some sort of project like that, but I've never been able to get it off the ground. And then my partner Justine, I talked to her about it, and I was thinking, well, what would you think about maybe doing an experimental, like, instrumental project, mixing, my stuff with what she does, which she is actually a classically trained violinist. And she's also like a conductor of the Bainbridge Youth Orchestra here and stuff. So her world of music is very different than like mine. And my thought was, well, let's just combine the two and see what we get out of it. Let's just start this whole duo thing. And so we thought, well, that'd be a great idea. But we had a lot of stuff going on, and it took us about a couple of years to finally get around to doing it. And until about last year, around April, a friend of mine called me up and said, "Hey, the OK Hotel is having a reunion show, and would you be interested in playing?" And I'm like, "Well," and we had just actually started this project finally. We were only like 2 weeks into it, and she was sitting next to me, and I said, "Well, they want us to play a show, but like we just started this project. We have like one song in the books right now." And she says, "Just say yes. We'll figure something out."
Yeah.
When is it? August 27th? Yeah, it's April now. That'll give us time. And so I said, "Well, we might have maybe about 7 songs or so, but, so not that much." She goes, "That's fine. There's going to be a lot of bands playing. We'll take whatever you got." Well, great. So that lit the fire under us to like, okay, let's really work on this project. And that pushed us. And actually, by the time the show came around in August, we had about 8 songs. And then from there, we just kept writing material. And around February 29th, well, actually, it was February 29th of this year, we released our first record. We put it out, of course, vinyl, made a limited CD print run, and it's all on digital sources. But it's really been a pretty exciting, experience in doing this kind of music, because it's all new to me. And when we play live shows, I set everything up. I just I have a small channel mixer that I put everything in. And so I always tell the sound guy, I said, "Well, you've got an easy job. You just adjust the volume. And if the mix is bad, everybody can just blame me. So you're off the hook."
Very good. One of my favorite songs off that Passing Vistas album is on March of the Earth. Do you have a story behind that one?
Oh, March of the Earth. I think that was one of the earlier songs that when I was talking about, how we just had a, 1 or 2 to begin with.
Yeah.
That was earlier ones. And it was just sort of I originally just kind of came up with the synth part. And I'd had that for a while, but I was like, well, I'm going to figure out what I want to do around it. And eventually, I just started putting more pieces together for it. And I had Justine, like, well, if you play the synth part, then maybe I can, come up with stuff with guitar and that kind of stuff. And so I just started laying, groundwork around, what she was doing. But it's definitely one of the earlier ones. And, just we're really, that was, helped me open up the path for everything else. It was kind of a link to Passing Vistas as well, the title track. Was that song.
Oh, cool.
So,
can you talk a little bit more about using Bandcamp? I know it's been around for a little while. It's not new, but it seems like it's growing in popularity. See a lot of artists using it to promote their bands. Can you talk a little bit about using that medium? Yeah,
we do use Bandcamp. I first used it. Bandcamp's been around for a long time. I want to say around 2016 when I actually first used it. I had a project together with a friend of mine, and we put something out on that. But yeah, we use it now. But now it changed so much that like it practically makes a web page out of it with all the different stuff. Which I really appreciate that, and it's great because now with that we were able to sell both digital and CD and vinyl off Bandcamp. Which I think is really great, and also being able to, have that as a link as well, because we did create we do have a website, canofclouds.com website, but we're able to put all the Bandcamp link and other social media links on that. Bandcamp's really great. I really love Bandcamp, and it's a great thing for bands and musicians, and I really enjoy using it.
Would agree wholeheartedly.
Before we get going deeper into your history, let's just talk about one more pre-Nirvana band, the Magnet Men. I've seen them listed as Tic Dolly Row and Magnet Men.
Well, it started out as the Magnet Men. It was just a 3-piece. It was me, a friend of mine, Chris Carr, and played bass, and the guitar player was John Hurt. And we were purely an instrumental, and we started doing some singing to it. And then we ended up changing our name to Tic Dolly Row when we got a singer, which was actually Ben Shepherd. Yeah. And he sang for us.
Yeah.
And, one of the first shows we had, there was a mannequin. Well, this is at the Tacoma Community World Theater, and we had this show with a band called Bliss, which was, of course, Nirvana before before they became Nirvana, and we opened for them, and Kurt really liked our set, and Ben had actually come out with there was a mannequin. I think it was a green. He brought this mannequin out, and he had these I don't know where he got these panties, but he put these panties on this mannequin and brought it out on stage. I don't even remember what he was doing to it, but maybe I don't remember. I don't remember. Anyways, it's kind of a crazy show, and that was actually the band that that introduced me to Bliss when we had the show together. So that was the band that bridged me to joining Nirvana.
Oh, cool.
Well, after your departure from Nirvana, you formed Fire Ants along with Brian Wood and Kevin Wood. The band released the Stripped EP, produced by Jack and Dino, we had on the podcast, and Kevin Wood. Yeah. We had Kevin on, too, a while back. But talk a little bit more about your work with Fire Ants and a bit more working with Kevin and Brian and the whole process.
Well, the Fire Ants, that was really fun. So me and Kevin, we used to work at a seafood restaurant together before we even started the band, and we always got along really, really well. And at that point, Andy Wood was doing the whole Mother Love Bone thing, and so Kevin really wasn't doing anything at the time, except for just plays all the time. And I was like, well, maybe we should start a band. And Kevin was like, yeah, okay, I know this guy, a bass player, Dan McDonald. So, okay, we'll get him together. And so we got together. We think we had a couple of people sing for us to start out with, which didn't work out. And then Kev was like, well, we could ask my brother. I don't know if he'll do it or not, but So we asked Brian, and he ended up wanting to do it. And that was an interesting band because it was a lot of fun. It was a really good time we had playing with, and had a lot of good shows. I remember Ben and Matt Cameron would come to all our shows because they were like, yeah, you guys are really my favorite local band right now. That's cool. So. But that band had a lot of promise to it, definitely, because Brian was really good singer. But the thing was, I don't really know if Brian ever really had any intentions to want to do anything, because our best shows that he played were the shows were smaller shows or shows that may not have mattered. Well, for example, we had A&M come out to see us. But Brian decided to be a spectator instead. So, we showed up at the show to play. We're up on stage, and Brian is in the audience, probably high on something, watching us play. And it's like, and then, anyways, it was sort of like, well, I think we lost interest, or they lost interest in us then. Yeah. But it was like that. He was always his best when it didn't matter.
You had Jack and Dino produce it. Talk a little bit about working with Jack.
I love working with Jack. It was ever since I met him the first time in recording for the Love Buzz Big Cheese single. He's really easygoing, really kick back, but he knows exactly what he likes. He's got his specific way of how he, mechanically in his head goes about things. And the fact that he's an all-round musician as well is kind of cool because, he'd come in and he'd look over the drums and go, okay, let's see here. And then, he's like, you mind if I tap on these? I'm like, yeah, sure, Jack, knock yourself out. He'll hit on these, and just kind of always has that kind of a very quizzical, sort of thing going on with him, which was always really cool. Sometimes you do a little tuning adjustments and whatnot, and says, all right, okay, that should work good. And so, any chance that to work with him was always great. And so recording with the Fire Ants was a lot of fun too with him. And it's always an interesting thing too. Like when you're recording with someone like Kevin Wood, he's like the solo king. Just
oh, he's a shredder,
yeah. He's the meaning of shred, exactly. So it's kind of funny because it's always like let's see if we can recording, and we'll find those perfect spots for him to just let loose. Sometimes it's kind of funny because I used to think, I bet Kevin wouldn't mind just shredding through the entire song. But I don't know. It was fun though. Me and Brian would fun around a lot too, because he gets super wound up and stuff like that. And I said, "Oh, you're so excited! You're so excited!" He goes, "Sure, I'm bringing this stuff up." Yeah, I know. He talked really fast. I talk really fast. He talked really fast. He's like, "Dude, come on! You're killing my buzz or whatever." So, but yeah,
well, you can really hear, in the Fire Ants, those guys would go on to do Devilhead and Hater, which I bought later on in the 90s. But, one of the things I love about doing all this is just diving into the the bands from Seattle that before they were famous, or who they worked with, and you see a lot of the same names repeating or intermingling around bands, and that's really cool. One of them is Dan McDonald. You would go on to work with him, and John Hurd. You go on to work with them in the Methodists, '95, but you had an album come out in '98, Cookie. Can you talk a little bit about the formation of that band?
Yeah. So after the Fire Ants ended, Dan had called me up and said, I got a friend of mine, Eric Spicer, and he's he's a songwriter, and he's looking to start a band. Would you be interested? Because I was new at the time. I said, yeah, sure, let's get together and jam. And so they came over to my place, and actually, it might have been Dan's house. Yeah, I think we went to Dan's place. And he ended up, we just ended up jamming on some of the songs and stuff. And I was immediately like, oh, wow, okay, this is some really cool songwriting. And I just immediately thought, oh, this is, I like what this guy's doing a lot, and I like his singing and all that. And after a couple times of playing together, I was like, I bet a second guitar player would be pretty cool in this band. So I gave my friend John a ring. I said, hey, there's this band that I'm working with these guys, Eric and Dan, and they're really cool. And I think that what they're playing might be right up your alley. And I was wondering if you want to come out and jam with us. And so John did, and then it just clicked. It was like, oh yeah, this totally works. So that was the beginning of the four of us, and that was really fun. We had our first demo that we did, which would have been cool to actually turn that into an album. I think it was only 5 or 6 songs on it, but we had a lot of really good feedback from that demo. And we later ended up picking up a manager, this guy, James Schultz, and ended up doing the Cookie record. And we did some touring. In fact, we ended up going down to LA, and with that band, that was the first band that I was in that I ever got to play the whiskey.
Oh, cool.
I never had an opportunity to do that on all the bands I'd been in prior and whatnot. It's like I never had that opportunity, but I did with the Methodists, so that was a lot of fun. Eventually, towards the end of that band, it just ended up being a 3-piece. We had changed our name to TV Ivy, and so it was just me and Eric and John, and John switched to bass. And that lasted kind of briefly, and then I really don't know I don't know why everything ended with that band. It's kind of one of those things that's foggy in my head. I don't really know, but anyways.
Well, Dance On is my favorite track off that album. That track is a banger. Talk a little bit more about that song.
Well, Dance On. So when the band first started, Eric was, I had all these songs, and I said, you know what, I write a lot of songs too. Would you be interested in hearing some of this kind of stuff? And he said, sure. And so I that was one of the earlier songs that I showed him. I was playing on guitar, and John was like, you know what, if you want to play guitar and sing that song, I'll go back on drums and play, because John could play drums. And I'm like, okay, sure. So we tried that, and we switched it up, and I played guitar and started, singing that song, and then John played drums. I ended up having other songs that John would play drums, and I would play guitar too. So during our set, when we play live, there would be that point where me and John would just switch places, and then Eric really enjoyed playing like lead guitar stuff over what I was doing. But I really enjoyed bringing that kind of stuff out in the band because I thought it fit right in. And Dance Song was just kind of one of the first ones that I put together for that song. I don't have any rhyme or reason for the lyrics. Usually I kind of don't. I just things just sort of spill out of my mouth. I write them down and say, "Oh, that'll do."
That song's a banger.
Yeah, I had a hard time picking one that was my favorite. I had written down "Drowned" and "Blue." Those are two different songs, but I remember the drums were pretty cool on those.
Yeah.
Can you talk about opening for Sweet 75, Chris Novoselic's band?
Oh gosh, I forgot all about that. So many things I try to. Where was that show at?
Well, that I don't know. It just said you guys your first show was opening for them. I read.
Oh, I'm trying to think where that was at. Well, right off the bat, it was great seeing Chris. After we parted, it was pretty. They were always so really busy all the time. So, but once in a blue moon, we'd cross paths and be like, "Hey, how you guys doing?" and all that kind of stuff. So it was always really cool. But it was actually really cool being able to hang out with him and even play a show with him. So. Yeah, that was pretty fun. I wish I could remember more of that. I can't remember. I didn't remember the venue. It's funny because sometimes I think, with everything that I've done, sometimes people are like, "Oh, you remember this show was?" And I kind of rely on them to tell me. I remember.
Yeah, very much so. Before Cars gave you the opportunity to take the reins on lead vocals. Talk a little bit more about the challenges of going from drummer to lead vocalist.
Well, switching up to vocals, it was kind of just the idea of singing itself was just something I really had to push myself to do. And luckily, like with the Methodists, that was like my first time ever actually breaking out and getting myself confident enough to sing. Before Cars was really a project that started for me that I had a chance to really express some of my biggest musical influences. Which was actually a lot of 70s singer-songwriter stuff.
Yeah.
Like from early Bowie to Jim Croce, Carole King, Carly Simon, Lightfoot. Just all this stuff that I heard because my dad was a disc jockey growing up. So I listened to him, on the radio every single day as a kid. And, every song that was, top 100, I heard like a zillion times over. So anyway, that was all my big influence with Before Cars. And I got to be able to do this whole singer-songwriter thing and just finally decide to put myself up front the entire time. I would switch between playing acoustic or playing the bass guitar. But I left all the drumming to my friend Andy Miller, Paul Burbeck, the lead and guitars and rhythm, and then but if he'd switch off, if I was playing guitar, he would usually play bass if the song required that. And also that was the first when we first started doing things with Justine Janot. She would come in with violin, and that whole project was I've got like 17 songs that are already written in my head for Before Cars. Someday I'll get around to doing maybe some final ending record or something like that.
Yeah.
I might call the record and so in closing or something like that. I don't really know, but it's a bunch of stuff that's still there that, if I find some space, breathing room down the road, I would like to do that. But I really did get into, the whole singing aspect a lot, and I really it helped me get more and more comfortable doing that. And it was really, really a lot of fun for me.
Yeah, fantastic.
I really enjoyed the 2008 album Walk Back. A lot of good tracks on there. Novocaine is one I wrote down as a highlight. There was too many to mention. They were all pretty good. Did you have a story from making that album?
Well, so there's another friend of mine, Derek Burns, who does solo stuff. When I was recording the record, I was like, oh, I'd like to have some backing vocals, get some more people singing on the record. And so I ended up bringing him in as well. And he even actually, I think, even provided some guitar work on that record. And of course, once again, I recorded this record with Jack and Dino.
Yeah. Yep.
And by that point too, I mean, it's just like, I was like, oh, you again. Yeah, me again. But it was, it was really kind of exciting for me to record this record, because it was like, okay, this is the first time that I'm doing a project where, it's everything that I've done. It's like all these songs that I've written prior, it was just like, well, I'll add a little bit of this, or I have a couple songs to add to there. This was my first actual all me project, songs I've written from finish to start with every song. And there's a song called Hey You on there that I should mention was the only song on that record that I didn't write. An old partner of mine, Daisy, she actually picked up the guitar one time, and I walked in on her. She was just noodling on the guitar and playing this song. And I was like, that's actually pretty cool. And I said, you mind if I work on that? And she said, yeah, sure, I don't care. So it was the only song that ever came out of her. But we ended up, I turned making into that new song. And Jack and Dino provides backing vocals on that song. Yeah, so it's good. It's like, yeah, you can hear them in there if you carefully. The backing vocals are kind of down in the mix a little bit on that one. But yeah, he actually supplies backing vocals for that song.
Oh, very cool. Well,
yeah.
You're songwriter, drummer, guitarist, bass player, singer. Where are you? Where's for you as the artist? What comes first? Is it still the drums, or is the vocalist part become the prioritizing what you are first and then all the way down?
Well, it's funny. I've always considered myself like more the master of nothing but jack of all trades sort of thing.
Well, you're a really good drummer.
I've never inspired myself to be like, okay, I want to be like as good as Neil Peart or a guitar. I never needed to be like an Eddie Van Halen or anything like that. My mindset for everything that I play is to play for the song. Yeah. Which, as a drummer, that would probably, drums were the very first thing I started, and that would be my first love. That's the instrument where I could just jump on a kit no matter what anybody's playing, what they're doing, and I could jam with them and play with them. That drums are my absolute comfort zone for me. So that's my first go-to for anything that I play. Next to that would probably be just guitars. But when I think of myself as a drummer, what I play really depends on what I hear. What do I think the song needs? Does it need a lot of fills, or does it need no fills, or any of this sort of thing? And that's kind of how I approach it. And so, yeah, drums would be one, guitar would be second. And when I write songs, usually I'll just sit down with the guitar, and it'll be some sort of melody thing that I'm strumming out. That'll usually be the first thing, and then right along with that, I'll just come up with some vocal melody over the guitar part. And generally, that's how I start. Most of my songs have been written that way. And lyrically, usually I'll make up something just right off the spot, maybe 2 or 3 lines. And I'll usually take there'll be a handful of words out of the first couple lines that I just coughed out for whatever, and I'll turn that into a song. I said, well, I actually like that song, so I'm going to base the song off of that idea and just write the rest out from there. And everything else just falls into place. It's like once I have that down, then the bass comes next, and then the bells and whistles, or a shaker or whatever, and backing vocals. But yeah, drums, guitar, and everything else after that.
Yeah, very good.
The Methodists had, I think I read, over 30 songs. So only 13 made it to the Cookie album. Are there plans to maybe release anything more from that era, or is that pretty much done?
I think that's pretty much done. Yeah, I don't see anything more from that going on. I mean, we did back in 20. We actually did go in the studio with Tad Doyle, which is his studio, Witching Studios. We released a handful of Magnet Man songs. We did like an EP, and we talked about doing maybe another EP at some point, but that kind of went crashing down. So people probably find out at one point or another, down the road. So I actually got diagnosed with MS. So that's it's kind of messed me up a little bit on my right side. So it's something I'm working with treatment and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of put a cap on a lot of things that I would do normally drum wise. So that would be tough for me to do another Methodist record, at least at this point, and Magnet Man, let alone that. So,
yeah. Wow, sorry to hear that.
Yes, absolutely.
It would behoove of us not to talk a little Nirvana, because I have a lot of friends that are big Nirvana fans, including myself. Take us back to that. I want to go back to the early days. Can you take us a little back to that? Pre-Bleach era, when you joined the band, and maybe the recording sessions for Bleach. Do you have a story from either that or the tour?
Yeah. So as most people are aware, of course, that somehow that record managed to get recorded in 6 days for $600.
Mm-hmm.
So
iconic.
Yeah, that will never be replicated. But and then it was Jason flipping the bill on it, even though he doesn't play on the record. But yeah, during the recording for that record, we were going around. Chris would drive his bus. He had this old bus. I can't remember what year it was, but I remember the gearbox or something, or something with the clutch was broken. But he would still drive us around town to the studio and stuff. And he would just sort of time the sound of the clutch, and then push the push the gear into first gear, just timing it. It was kind of strange. But on tour, one time we were driving through Montana, and I was driving. Kurt was asleep. Chris was asleep, but in the driver's seat. And I was bored, and I just I just decided to drive with my teeth. So I grabbed the steering wheel, driving with my teeth, and because through Montana it's just one straight road, and it just goes and goes and goes. So there I was, just hanging out, driving with my teeth. Chris wakes up, and he looks at me, and goes, "Chad, what are you doing?" And I'm just like, "Oh, I grabbed the steering wheel." And, "You can't do that. That's dangerous. You can't do that." And I said, okay, all right, I'll drive with my hands. I didn't have the heart to tell him that I'd already been driving that way for 2 hours.
Oh, my God.
Sorry. Yeah. And then one time, this was down in Texas, after a show, we ended up camping out at this lake. And we were by this lake, and all of a sudden, there's a bunch of, I think there were ducks there and stuff like that. We all of a sudden heard lots of rustling around, these ducks squawking, and we, got a flashlight trying to look around. And I swear there was an alligator somewhere in that lake. We were told that, I don't know where we found it, but I thought someone said, something like, "Oh, beware of alligators," something like that. So Chris, I think, ended up, we ended up taking a bat and putting motor oil on it to begin with, and because we didn't have any firewood, because we thought, let's just start a fire too, just to be safe. So we lit a bat on fire as it and stuck it in the ground for our fire, and just kind of intently watched out over the lake as what maybe ducks were getting eaten. I don't really know what was going on with that. But that was weird.
Well, we have one last question for you, then we'll leave you alone for the evening. Growing up, your family moved 73 times, and that is an enormous amount of times to move. talk a little bit more about those moves and how it impacted you as a child into your adulthood.
Yeah, 73 times. And it's kind of crazy. 5 months after I was born in Santa Rosa, I had my first move. It was actually also my first plane trip. And it just never stopped from there. And commonly I'm asked, well, is it military? I said, no, it's not military. So like I mentioned earlier, my dad being a disc jockey.
Right.
But back then, my dad was always going for better offers. I mean, he would always be looking for better offers and for better money and better work. Because unless you were like a Casey Kasem or a Wolfman Jack or, a shock jock, you just didn't make, you didn't make the money that, maybe a lot of, radio personalities do now. It's just a whole different story back then. Also, too, I think a lot of it was, we struggled financially a lot. So I think there were a lot of times where things were like, this seems a bit odd. It's kind of like, well, for example, I was living in Idaho. I come back from school, and all of a sudden, parked in our driveway is the biggest U-Haul truck money can rent. And, you walk inside, and my mom's like, okay, you kids all pack up your room and, get everything in boxes, which was kind of an easy thing for me to do because since we moved about every 5-6 months anyways, I kept my stuff in boxes because I figured, well, I'm probably going to move again soon anyway, so I might as well keep it in the box. And the whole truck's loaded up, and you're heading down the road about, 2:30 in that evening or that morning. And so, I mean, that's really not a normal moving procedure to do. But, and I mean, it was difficult. I became pretty closed off for much of my childhood because I figured, well, it doesn't really make much sense to make any friends or anything because, I'm not going to be here long enough anyways. But on the other side of the coin too, the ability to adapt is something I've been able to do really, really well. I'm also incredibly, comfortable on the road. So, kind of pros and cons to that kind of stuff. But you see a lot of stuff too. I mean, it's kind of an adventure when you're moving and doing that kind of things. You live in places you never thought you'd live. I mean, we got a single wide mobile home trailer up in Fairbanks, Alaska, and and they commonly get tremors and earthquakes there. And one evening, the trailer just starts shaking and things are falling off the wall and all this kind of stuff. And my dad's like, okay, everybody get underneath the doors and all that kind of stuff. And it goes on for about a few minutes and then it stops. And then I said, oh, well, that was kind of a big one. And then it starts up again. And everything's shaking. And then it stops. And then it starts up again. And then for another few moments, and then it stops again. At this point, my dad's like, this is kind of strange. He goes to investigate. He opens the door, and he looks outside. And on the corner of this trailer is a 12-point buck moose scratching his ass in the corner of our trailer.
Oh, my God. That's awesome.
That's just like, what? But, I mean, there's, so many things that you just kind of see and experience when you move as often as I have like that. But that's, that's just 73 with my parents. I'd probably tack on another 20 myself. Yeah. Not to be them, but.
Well, Chad, we're out of our allotted time for the evening. Is there anything that we left off tonight that you would like to plug or promote?
Well, other than, check out Can of Clouds. It's a new adventure experience for me. We're trying to, get out and play out as much as possible. And maybe hopefully someday we'll be able to go out on a tour. And, that would be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Well, this is how things are going to work out. Once Jeff gets this all cleaned up and make it sound like $1 million. And then once this is all ready to go, I'll send you the link and please share it on all your socials if you could.
Sure. Yeah, definitely.
Fantastic. Well, we want to thank you for being our guest tonight. It was an honor. Thank you for the correspondence. I'm sorry I bugged you on Facebook about it, but I was like, we love your work. We just wanted to get you on so bad. So thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, guys. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Okay, I will look forward to that.
Thank you, Chad.
All right. Thank you.
You bet.
Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Take it easy. Bye.
Everybody hides at home inside their nest of snakes. Everybody grinds the stone and makes their own mistakes. Hide in the headlights, fight the grip of fear. You can make your dreams come true, but you just can't do it here. Everybody eyes the gun and screams inside their head. Everybody bites their tongue and pays their bills instead. Hide in the spotlights, fight the grip of death. You can have the air you need, but you best not take one breath. Hey! Roll the dice. Take your chances. Everybody knows the game is fixed, there is no prize. Everybody pulls the plug and says their last